Well, good morning and a very warm welcome to the Carbon Academy. My name is Wendy Buckley and I'm Client Director over here at Carbon Footprint, and delighted to have you join us for this morning's session. Our topic today, why carbon reduction is not enough. This is an absolutely fascinating and crucial topic, and I'm delighted to have John Buckley as our expert speaker to lead us through this important topic today. This is what we're going to tackle. We're going to start off with the invisible garbage problem. We'll outline exactly what that is and what you can do about it. We're going to then give you an update on what's happening with the high integrity carbon offsetting program, which has come on leaps and bounds. Then John's going to move on to solutions on what you're practically going to do, and that will lead into a demonstration of a couple of really important platforms, being the carbon ratings and insights platform, CRISP, and the carbon marketplace, which will guide you through all of this important stuff with a Q&A there at the end, and that should bring us in on the hour. So that is where we are. Let's then move to give you a bit more information on who we are, just as you're probably doing grabbing those QR codes and filling in that little 1 minute survey for us. We know many of you on the call. It's so good to see so many of you here. Carbon Footprint has been providing consultancy-led solutions to climate change now for over 20 years. And we serve thousands of companies and also consumers as well with all our work. The thing that's really transformed over the last few years has been that we've really started to move, and now technology first business, really underpinned by those 4 platforms that we are using there. A lot of you I know are using the Sustract measurement and management software. We have the CADI, the Carbon Database Initiative, which really is the font of all carbon knowledge and is really becoming the carbon footprint of anything, with free disclosure, which is so important for choice. 2 platforms we're going to concentrate more on today are the carbon ratings and the carbon marketplace, and that is the technology foundation to all that we do. We also have those badges, the important ISO badges at the end there as your assurance in all the things that we have. Let's move on. We asked, do you have a carbon reduction plan, which should be at the center of everything that we do. Let's have a look at that. Wow, that's good to see that the large proportion of you do. John, do you jump in with any comments about what you recognise from this, of course? And interestingly, we've got 21%, 20%-ish. I love it when it changes like this. Who don't know when that's going to be. This is something that's very important, and I hope you're going to take away some things which are the imperative of why you need to do that this morning. Moving on down, if you have a carbon reduction plan, how soon until you get to the 50% reduction? Let's have a look there. Okay, so quite some variation in responses there. John, do you have any comment on that? Does that fit with what you've seen from what a lot of our clients
it does. It obviously varies from client to client. It's good to see here that some people are very close, or one person is very close within 1 year of getting to their 50% reduction. I wonder what the so most for sort of net zero targets, the usual goal is to get there within the next 10 years by 2035 at the latest. So it's good to see actually the majority of people or companies would achieve that. Obviously, then there's still the final bit to achieve beyond that. Yeah.
There is always that magic number of 2030. I know it doesn't have to be that, though it is quite commonplace, isn't it, to see that one. It does depend, obviously, when you started. Yeah, okay, fascinating. Let's move along. Okay, what happens to residual carbon emissions that your business continues to emit? This does sound a bit like a GCSE question, doesn't it? And we let you fill in as many of these as you wanted to. So interesting, look at that. 74% say we compensate these. There we go. Very interesting. And here we go, 21%. They go into the atmosphere and add to global warming. That's great that we know our science. Obviously, it would do. So really, that one, yeah, everyone should have been taking that one as well. Okay, we do have a small percentage there saying we don't consider these, and we'll chat about that in just a bit. Let's move on down here. Okay, have you supported carbon offsets? Great. Okay. This is changing. There we go. We've got a majority saying yes, actually, against that, and a small amount saying no. John, any thoughts on that at the moment?
It's kind of interesting comparing this question and the previous one, isn't it? That 88% is that I can't quite see my eyes, but say that they are supporting carbon offsets, but only 75% are compensating it. I wonder if that means that some people, yeah. Well, the fourth question is have ever. So it looks like some people may have stopped. So it'll be interesting to sort of explore that a little bit.
Yep, I'm sure that'll come through in what we're going to talk about next. What types of carbon offsets, if you're making them, have you been supporting? Right. Now, this is a mixed old bag. John, what do you make of this? It looks like we've got slightly more on removals.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah,
given that they've been around too long.
Well, they've been around in terms of forestry projects for a little while, but there isn't a huge quantity of removals compared to reductions. So there's a bit of a supply and demand in that issue in that area. Obviously, removals is the final part of the jigsaw when you're going for net zero at the very end. That if once you reduce by 90% or more, then the final bit would have to be done by
this
removals.
Isn't the split you'd see as the recommend from the Oxford Principles on carbon offsetting. I'd comment as well.
Not at the moment, no. It's kind of it'd be more moving towards removals and adding it in over time. But that's interesting to see that a lot of people on this call have already gone that way, which is good.
There you go.
And that worked.
It's now my pleasure actually to hand over to you, John.
Well, thank you very much. Thanks for the introduction. Very interesting to see the poll results. So thanks for everybody who participated in that. So I'm now going to talk through the majority of the presentation. Part one is the invisible garbage problem. So let's see if I can get the slides to move. Yeah, so this is the issue where with carbon emissions, we're looking at things. Well, looking is an interesting word. We can't see the carbon emissions; they're invisible. We can't smell them and we can't touch them. So in a way, they're easy to ignore, as are not just carbon but all the greenhouse gas emissions. And we often wonder if we could see them, could smell them, could touch them, whether our whole approach to carbon offsetting would be slightly different. So think of it as waste, and a lot of companies have now net zero targets to sort of reduce to net zero between now and 2050 typically, and what they're doing is they've set plans to reduce gradually over that time, but whilst that's happening, the carbon emissions are building up. And if this was waste in your organization and you decided actually we're not going to offset the carbon, we're not going to remove that waste, we're just going to have a plan to reach net zero waste by 2050, it would be kind of bonkers because the waste would be building up and building up outside until you get to that 2050 point where you've reduced the amount that you're producing each year by 90%, great, and but it's still there, and then it's just the final 10% you're going to remove each year. So you're never actually going to tackle the pile of waste that you produced. And that's kind of what's happening with carbon at the moment. So if you think of it as a garbage problem, but an invisible garbage problem. Even though you're on the way to net zero, if you're not offsetting at the moment and not compensating for those carbon emissions, then your carbon is piling up in the atmosphere, and that becomes obviously a huge global problem. So we know reduction is important. In fact, that goes without saying. We all need to be reducing our carbon emissions, but we also believe in the current climate emergency, reducing a little bit each year to reach that 90% target by 2050 is nowhere near fast enough. And we know it's not fast enough because current projections are we're not going to hit the 1.5 degree climate change target. So we need to do things a lot quicker, and we need to support the global net zero goals. So we need to ramp up the amount of effort that's going in around the world, and the only way to do this is by funding projects that reduce carbon emissions. Firstly, reduce the amount of carbon going into the atmosphere, and also to fund projects that remove carbon from the atmosphere. We know that has to happen. The question is, where does the funding come from? Typically, we might consider governments should be responsible for paying for it, maybe, but then if governments have to do it, then individual taxpayers have to pay for it. So the tax would come from individuals and corporates in terms of corporation tax, which obviously isn't an ideal situation either. So for me, it makes more sense that the companies who are responsible for most of the carbon emissions are actually compensating for their carbon as we go. And at the moment, there isn't enough money going into projects to mean there's enough voluntary carbon credits around to be able to offset all the carbon emissions in the world, and the market needs to expand significantly for that to happen. And as we mentioned a little bit earlier during the poll, in terms of the carbon removal, we're nowhere near having the capacity to remove carbon from the atmosphere at the moment, and we need to be investing now in those types of projects to make them viable in the future, so they're scalable. So that's the important thing. But we've got a bit of a problem, and we see this all the time, that for some reason, if you carbon offset, it's seen as a bad thing, which is just bonkers. So you've got a kind of a company which has a net zero plan. They may have signed up to something like science-based targets or working with our net zero standards, which is all great. But the goal is obviously to reduce carbon emissions by a certain time in the future, and that's often a long way away, like 2050, so 25 years away. And they'll, by promoting themselves as being on the path to net zero, they're seen as being pure and virtuous, and that's all brilliant. So, but they're ignoring the carbon emissions, like I said, that invisible waste pile that's piling up whilst they're on that track. Whereas company 2 is also reducing their carbon emissions and is taking responsibility and offsetting, but sometimes they get demonized for some bizarre reason, and that's kind of the world that we're in at the moment. Where obviously company B is doing more and paying a much bigger contribution to the climate change goal. So we need to sort of evolve our thinking a little bit here, and we need to do it quickly because at the moment we're well on track to miss the targets. So I think a lot of this comes from distrust in the voluntary carbon market. I'm sure a lot of people will have seen, the press releases and news stories a couple of years ago where some carbon projects were picked out as potentially not achieving their goals, and kind of we all hear this, and we also fear that if we promote our business as being green and carbon neutral, and we've offset the carbon emissions, that we may get called up for greenwashing, which is kind of bonkers in a way, and it's actually causing a negative effect on the amount of money that's being pushed into these types of projects now. And there's a sort of the term is green hushing, so rather than greenwashing, people are so scared of some companies are so scared of promoting themselves as being carbon neutral or net zero, whatever the term is that they want to use, that they don't make a big song and dance about it, which then means that other companies aren't hearing it, and we're losing that leadership. So we need to turn around this narrative a little bit. So as we said earlier, the correct strategy is actually to do both. We do need to be reducing, it goes without saying, we need to be reducing our carbon emissions and having a net zero target by 2050 to reduce, or whenever, or earlier, ideally earlier, is obviously a good thing to have. But what we're saying is, as well as doing that, we need to be doing offsetting as well. We need to be taking responsibility for that invisible waste pile that's currently building up. Even though we're on track to net zero, we need to be taking responsibility for it now, because by the time we get to 2050, it's going to be way too late. So for the carbon offsetting market, we need to make sure that what we're doing is we're supporting good projects, and it's that flight to quality that we need to be really focusing on, and that's the important thing now. So we'll move on and have a look now at how the market is shaping up in this flight to quality. And one of the leading things here is what's called the ICVCM CCP. So lots of acronyms there. So ICVCM, for those of you who haven't heard of it, it's the Integrity Council for the Voluntary Carbon Market. It was set up, it was initially announced by Mark Carney at the Glasgow COP many years ago. Was it 2021? It was actually run, I think. And now it's sort of here, and it's starting to produce these things called CCPs. And CCP stands for Core Carbon Principles. So it's ICVCM, Integrity Council for the Voluntary Carbon Market, Core Carbon Principles. And here's the update on what's happening there. So the work's moving on. We did a webinar earlier on in the year where we gave an update on the voluntary carbon market, and we did discuss the ICVCM there. Since then, things have moved on, and especially around core carbon principles and the labeling of carbon credits, which is great. There's two parts to ICVCM. First is a program needs to be verified, needs to be checked and made sure it's eligible for issuing core carbon principle labeled credits. So the programs are what we typically call the registries. So they're things like Vera's VCS registry, Gold Standard, and a heap of others. And then there's the methodology of the projects themselves. So, it's the methodologies of the types of projects. Each particular type of project will have, project type has slightly different methodology that fits with that project type. So a forestry project will have a different methodology compared to a renewable energy project, for instance, obviously. And ICVCM has been going through lots of methodologies and have been saying which ones are good, which ones are bad. So we'll go through that in a second. And the methodology is kind of what I've said here on the slide. They're kind of the rule books, the guidelines that the project needs to be following, and the checks that are in place to make sure they're achieving the carbon savings. So the ICVCM CCP, called Carbon Principles, eligible programs. So as of today, there are 7 ICVCM CCP eligible programs, and they're the ones listed here. The 2 that we've focused on since probably almost the beginning of time for us as a business is the Gold Standard and Verified Carbon Standard, but there are others, and there's American Carbon Registry, there's a Climate Action Reserve, both predominantly US related. Then there's 3 newer programs that are listed at the bottom here. As well as these, there's 8 more programs that are currently being assessed for approval. And the assessment for those other 8, for majority of them, has actually been going on for some time. So I'm not sure why it's taking so long, but I'm sure over time, some of these will also pop into the top list of approved programs that we can buy carbon credits from. If you're interested to watch this and see how it develops quite slowly, but I put the URL here so you can visit the ICVCM website and you can sort of watch how this develops over time. The next thing is the methodologies. So it's kind of the rule book of the individual projects, if you like. So now the ICVCM has actually reviewed quite a few of these. There's still a lot to do, and when we look at the individual methodologies, like the landfill gas one, for instance, or any of them, they've reviewed maybe one version of some methodologies, and just because the latest version has been approved, the previous versions may not have been reviewed yet and approved, so we don't know what the status of those will be. And some of the some of the projects, landfill gas one is actually quite a good example here. Although it's been, a lot of the methodologies around landfill gas have been approved, there are some caveats. So for instance, with the landfill gas project, if you go into the ICVCM website and look at the details, although they've approved it subject to the landfill gas project not generating more than 10 megawatts of electricity. So if it's a bigger scale, turning more into more electricity and pumping that onto the grid, then it's not approved. So it's quite complicated. So it's not just a case of looking at which methodologies are being ticked. It's actually, you've got to open the documents and sort of read a little bit about them as well. But the good thing is ICVCM is going through the process and they're making some progress, and we now have some methodologies that have been approved, which is amazing. So then the next thing to do is find the actual projects that have been labelled. And this is kind of the rub, if you like, because actually, as of now, there aren't a huge amount of CCP labelled credits. And by CCP labelled, we mean projects that have been assessed, projects where they're using a methodology that's been assessed, and the registries are now labelling those credits, not the project, it's actually the credits, to say that those credits meet the ICVCM CCP requirements. And at the moment, there's only around 60 million credits that have been issued. So it's not a huge amount compared to the global demand. And in fact, some of the larger companies out there may need that sort of amount of credits anyway on their annual emissions offsetting. So it's not a huge amount. And what we're seeing is obviously the supply pipeline is growing, but the demand is really outpacing supply. What we're finding is that a lot of companies or certain big corporates have keyed on to the ICVCM CCP, and they're coming up with requirements for their own carbon offsetting that includes that they'll only buy for ICVCM CCP, which is fine, but then they have other requirements as well of they need to be carbon removal, they need to come from certain regions of the world, etc., etc. So certainly when you put all the requirements together that some of the larger corporates are putting together, it's actually impossible to meet at the moment. I'll go on to now showing you the type of projects that are labelled. So Vera has the majority of issued credits. So a second ago we said that there's about 60 million in total. Vera has just over 43 million credits issued. This is when I last looked 2 days ago. The majority of those, almost 31 million credits, come from projects that use a methodology around fugitive emissions from fuels. So it's basically fixing gas leaks. And there's only 2 countries which have issued credits so far under Vera. So there's 30.8 million credits coming from Bangladesh and Uzbekistan. So there's not a huge amount of choice there. And then the only other type of project that Vera have CCP labelled credits on is the landfill gas projects. So these are from capturing methane, often usually flaring it, and sometimes turning some of the flared energy into electricity as well. So you can see kind of here we've got 2/3 of the current issued carbon credits are coming from just 2 types of projects, and with just one of the programs, one registry. If we move on to the gold standard, at the moment, they only have 1 type of project, which is the flaring of landfill gas, that's issued 3.4 million tonnes of credits. So once again, that's far less than what Vera has at the moment, but it's another landfill gas project. So if you're wanting to support cookstove projects at the moment, for instance, because they have strong social benefits, at the moment, there are no credits that have been CCP labelled. Going forward in time, there will be, but at the moment there aren't. So that becomes a bit of a problem. Also with the ICVCM, they haven't accepted every single methodology. They have rejected some methodologies. And so what does that mean? Does that mean that actually every methodology that has been rejected is bad, means the project is bad? Not necessarily. So the methodology is basically the test, and I kind of think of this a bit like a child doing A levels. So imagine your child doing A-level maths, for instance, and they work really hard, and then the test at the end just tests them on multiplication, division, and subtraction sort of thing, and they get an A star. Well, that's great. They've passed that test, but actually that test wasn't really rigorous enough to do for A-level maths. But it doesn't mean that child wouldn't have passed that more rigorous test. It just means that the test wasn't good enough. So it's the same with the projects. A project using a methodology rejected by the ICVCM may still meet the requirements of a more rigorous methodology. And ICVCM acknowledges this. And with some of the methodologies that have been rejected, you've now got the standards organizations like Vera and Gold Standard reviewing them and updating them to make them more rigorous, so that they should meet the ICVCM going forward. And then projects will have the option to reassess against those new improved methodologies. So it still puts us into this sort of two camps, doesn't it? So we've got a bunch of credits that have been approved and labeled with the ICVCM CCP label, which is great. So we know they're verifiable and meet all the CCP requirements around additionality, etc. So that's all great, but actually there isn't a huge amount of choice. There aren't a huge amount of projects available, and the price is often a little bit higher than other projects. So you've got that issue at the moment. Whereas the other projects that haven't been CCP labeled yet, some just because the methodologies haven't been assessed, and others with rejected methodologies, may carry for you guys some risk or uncertainty when you're buying the credits as to how do you know if they're good enough. So finding a good quality credit is the next challenge, isn't it? So that's what we're going to move on to next. So the question is no longer can you trust any credits? Yes, you can trust some credits, but how do you find the credits that you can trust and buy? So that leads us on to part 3, the solution. So we're here in this case, Brave New World, navigating the new market. ICVCM has provided those rules. We know we need to offset our carbon emissions because of the mounting pile of garbage. So this is where integrated platform system should hopefully help you. We've got CRISP, which is Carbon Ratings Insight platform, which is kind of the intelligence layer. It shows you how good the projects are. And with CRISP, what we do, we've rated so far just under 2,000 projects, I believe. We don't sell all those projects. We try to rate as many as we can. And then there's Comp, which is our carbon offset marketplace. So this is where you can actually go to buy carbon credits and perform your carbon offsetting. So that's all good. So I'll show you now how the CRISP system works. So we've built CRISP. It's been running for about a year now, and it translates all the complex data that you can find on the registries into something, a simple 5-star rating system. It's there to make life easy. So a simple 5-star rating system, a bit like you get on Amazon when you're buying things, or a Trustpilot type rating if you like. And what we do is we look at the 4 key areas of the ICVCM's core carbon principles. So it's additionality. So is would the project have happened without the carbon finance? Is it measurable? Is it easy to measure the carbon savings, or is how uncertain is that measurability of it? Permanence, are the carbon savings, once they're made, are they saved forever? So permanent, so an example there is you could argue that a forestry project, although it may be taking carbon dioxide out of the atmosphere now, is how permanent is it if there's a forest fire or change in government and the forest gets cut down to make a housing estate or something, who knows? So there's a permanence issue. And then there's leakage. And leakage is about unintentional consequences of causing increased carbon emissions somewhere else. So you've made all these great savings, but then effectively some of the savings are leaking out somewhere else. And an easy way of visualizing this is things like a RED project, a reducing emissions from deforestation project, where you may be protecting a particular area of forestry from deforestation and illegal logging, but then the illegal loggers just move down the road to a neighboring forest and start logging there. So that's just leakage. So that would negate all the good work that you've done on a particular area. So every project has to assess these, and they've been assessing these for a while, and it's always been covered under the key standards like Vera's VCS, Verified Carbon Standard, and the gold standard. But there's still a bit of haziness around it. So what we've done is we've assessed against those four parts of the core carbon principles, and then we've also given a rating of how well the project rates against the ICVCM CCP. So if the methodology hasn't been assessed yet, then we'll give it a 3-star, because we don't know. If the methodology has been assessed and passed, then it gets 5-star. If the methodology has failed, then it gets 1-star. It's quite a simple system. So it gives you a bit of an indication there. So let's show you. So let's jump into it. So if you want to have a look at this is free to use, completely free, no login required at the moment. So go and have a look. The URL for it is carbon-offset-ratings.org, so quite simple to remember. So you can go in there, have a look. If you click around, you can click on the rating system, and this will tell you a little bit more about how we rate the projects. Basically, a little bit of what I've just told you. You can click and find out more about the additionality, permanence, leakage, etc. It sort of explains it all there. What we do is we use artificial intelligence to help assess the projects. So it looks at the project documentation on Vera's website, or any of the websites, gold standard websites, and it downloads the project design documentation, the verification and monitoring reports, and validation reports, and it'll go through all those, and then it'll make a judgment about whether the project needed finance, additionality, whether the savings will be permanent, etc., etc. So it's quite a simple set of criteria, and the AI looks after it and does that. So it's kind of independent from us in a way, because we don't actually do it ourselves. Then you can click on, so once you've understood the rating system, what you really want to do is dig in and start looking at the project. So it's simple, click on the projects page and you get to search around. So you can select the country, you can search for the country, the project type, the standard, and the ICVCM CCP approved status, or you can just put a keyword search in there. So if you're buying a project from somewhere else, we do have competitors, and you wanted to check out the project to see if it's any good, you could come in here and just type in the VCS or the gold standard or whatever the project number is in here. So for instance, I've typed in here project 2401, which just happens to be a verified carbon standard project, which is this project reforestation of degraded lands in Sierra Leone. I can see straight away that that's actually got a 4-star rating, which isn't too bad. It's a carbon removal project. I can click on it, and it then opens up a page that shows me a lot more information about the project. Shows you the project number, the standard, the type, the methodology number, how many annual credits it's likely to produce each year, when it started, and when it's likely to end. And you've also got the registry link to the Vera website, so you can go and actually have a look at the documentation yourself if you wanted to do that. If you scroll down a little bit, you can see a bit more of the breakdown of the ratings. The overall rating, as I think I said earlier, is actually an average rating, average of the 5 ratings that are below. And then below that, you've got which UN SDG goals it hits, and below that, if you scroll down, you get more information about the project. And then scroll down further, it actually gives you an explanation of why it gave the ratings it did. So it's fully transparent, and you can search around. Like I say, there's got probably approaching 2,000 projects on the system at the moment. So have a look. If there's any projects that you'd like us to rate that aren't on here yet, then drop us a line, contact us, and we'll happily do that one for you. But yeah, because we're adding projects all the time, and our goal actually is to significantly grow it over the next year, probably by a factor of 10 if there's that amount of projects that are available. So look at the ratings, so that's good. So we can now see kind of different ratings of different projects, which is all good. But how do you actually buy? The next thing is to look at our carbon offset marketplace. It's a new e-commerce platform that we've got. It's been launched for about just over a month now, and most of our carbon offset sales are now going through the COM platform, which is great. It's fully connected with Crisp, which I'll show you in a second now, and I'll show you what else you can see on it. So let's jump straight into it, should we? So to find it, you can find it obviously directly through our website, which is obviously carbonfootprint.com. But if you want to go straight to this now, it's not carbonfootprint.com. Just change the end bit to .store. So it's carbonfootprint.store, and you'll come across this website. This one you do need to sign into, and you do need to create an account, but it's free to do so. If you're already using our Sustrax carbon accounting platform, your login and password same one will work here. And if you've got a Google or Microsoft account, you can use those as well. So yeah, create an account, log in, and then once you've done that, you'll appear on a page that probably looks a bit like this. So at the top of the page, you've got our traditional kind of bundled type of projects that we used to sell on our website. So you can do the tree planting still, you can select a UK tree or Kenya tree, and that's budded with VCS carbon offsetting. So for every tree we plant, we also purchase a VCS carbon credit to guarantee those carbon savings, because obviously trees grow quite slowly. We've got the global portfolio, which is just a mix of good projects across the world, community projects that focus more on projects that have strong social benefits, and then the Americas portfolio for those of you that may be in the US, or in North or South America, there's projects there that are specifically in that geographic region. The really interesting bit though is when you scroll down a little bit further, you can just see it here, the carbon offset projects. So here you can actually get in and choose the individual projects you want to support. At the moment you can see there's 67 projects available for you to pick and choose from. This changes all the time. We've got new projects coming in, and obviously it's a live system, so credits are being sold as well. So some projects can run out. You can filter and sort, so it's just a default filter, not quite sure what that does, but if you can sort by price, you can sort by the Crisp ratings. If you know a specific project that you're looking for, you can put it in the search, a bit like I did for the Sierra Leone project, which just happens to be here. You can put the VCS number or the gold standard number. You can search on the particular standards, search on the particular top type, countries, and the ICVCM status. So if we click on that, you can click on the approved ones, and then you see the ICVCM approved projects that have, well, not projects, credits that are ICVCM CCP labeled. So here at the moment it looks like we've got 7 projects, and the majority of these are landfill gas projects. The ones just below the screen here are actually the fugitive emissions from fuel projects. The other thing to point out is you've got the label of the project type, and you've got a picture, you've got the label of the top project type, you've got the standard name, verified carbon standard there, gold standard there, the project name, the location, country where it is, you've got the project ID number, and the vintages. We haven't mentioned vintages yet. So vintages, for those that don't know, is the period of time, the year, when the carbon savings or the carbon removal from that project were made. And the way the carbon market works is you can only buy the carbon credits and retire them once the carbon savings have been made. So you're always buying credits that have been generated from savings or removals in the past. So it just tells you, these vintages just tells you when those savings actually occurred. And it usually takes a little while from the savings being made to having it verified and then the credits being issued. So there's usually a couple of years at least between when the credits were issued, when the savings were made, and when you can actually use the credits. It's always worth looking at the vintages. Sometimes you'll see companies selling very old credits, and I think it's best to try and buy credits that are certainly within the last 5 years, or certainly within 5 years of the measurement that you've taken that you're trying to offset. Below the vintages, you've got the CRISP ratings, and you've got a link to the project on CRISP. So click that, goes to the CRISP website, and you get to land straight on the project page. So that's all great. So you can see the prices here, and you can add, so you can select and put in the amount that you want to buy. Once you've selected a few projects, you can go to your shopping basket, see what's there, and then proceed to check out. So it's just a standard process. This is the important bit. So once you press that proceed checkout button, you get to put some details in here. So carbon offset registry name stroke title. So this will be the name that goes on the carbon offset registry when it's retired. It's also the name that will appear on your certificate that you'll be able to download once you've finished the purchase. On the registries, you get an option to say a little bit more of the reason for the retirement. So this is completely optional, but you can write specific year of the carbon emissions that you're assessing, or whatever you want really. If it's an event, you can talk about the event, and those words will go onto the carbon registry. The certificate date is just for the certificate. It doesn't impact the carbon registry, because sometimes you may be buying, it's for a particular event, and you might want to have the event's date on there, for instance. And then you proceed to payment. So the payment is done securely. It's all done through Stripe. So that handles all that. The good things with Stripe is it allows you to pay obviously immediately with a credit card, but you can also download a certificate, an invoice, which you then obviously pass on to your finance department, who can then process the invoice as they would usually. So it's all quite straightforward to do. Once you've paid, you've kind of done all the hard work. You can download the certificate immediately, and we also, like I said earlier, we'll also retire the credits on the carbon registry. So we'll send you a link which will take you to a web page which looks a little bit like the screen grab that I've got at the bottom here. So that's kind of the proof of you've actually done it. So it's verifiable, and from that link, it's hard to see on this one because it's so small, but there is a little view button which then takes you to all the project documentation and shows you more and more stuff on the actual registry. So that's the proof of impact. So how much does it actually cost to do this? So you've seen some prices on the screen there. If you're looking to offset a larger amount, do let us know, because we have a different tier level for larger offsetting. So if you're offsetting 10,000 tons, there are slightly better prices than what you've just seen on the screen, for instance. So do let us know if you need to offset larger amounts, and we'll put you on the correct tier level. The cost of compensating your emissions, it's one of those things that people, often companies say we can't afford to do it because it's too expensive. So what we suggest you do is, if you already know what your footprint is and you're not offsetting yet, then have a look at what the prices are on the website, on the comp website, and then you will get a feel for how much it's going to cost. And you can use that in your budgeting, maybe for next year or the next time it comes around, so it can be budgeted for. But typically the cost of carbon offsetting is going to be less than 0.1% of the turnover of your business, which is relatively small compared to the impact that the carbon emissions are having. So that's most of what I wanted to talk about today. Just before we go into the question and answer session, though, we'll do a quick summary. This is the overview of what we've discussed. So we've looked at the invisible garbage pile. The problem is real. We know we've got to reduce, and we're setting a net zero target. Ideally, you should have one of those as well, so you have a target that's in line with the science of what's needed to achieve the climate change goals. But the argument is we can't just keep ignoring that invisible garbage pile that's building up whilst we're on this route to net zero. The great thing is the market is now ready. ICVCM has moved on enough now and has is now creating a credible market with high quality CCP labeled supply of credits. It's a bit limited at the moment, but will grow. And we've shown you how you can actually look at other types of projects as well, using the CRISP platform to give you confidence in terms of their additionality, permanence, measurability, leakage, etc. So even if the methodology hasn't been verified yet or failed, you can still get some idea of that individual project's quality from looking at the CRISP platform. And then we've shown you comp, which is how to actually take that final action from thinking about it to actually doing it. And the world is evolving and things are improving, but don't just keep waiting for ICVCM to get better or the carbon credits to get better, because we'll be, if we're waiting for the perfect, we'll never get there. And we need to start action right now. We need to change, evolve our thinking to really address the climate change emergency and stop waiting for the perfect of tomorrow and stop doing the good today. And on that, oh no, there's the next steps slide. So the next step is obviously if you are already offsetting and you'd like to look at these platforms, then obviously you can log in yourself and have a look. But if you'd like a demo and talk to one of our team, then please feel free to book a demo. There's a QR code here to do that. And you've got our contact details as well. So there's the info@carbonfootprint.com and the phone number. So feel free to get in touch. We're happy to show you these platforms, and obviously that's part of our whole platform ecosystem of the CRISP, of the Sustrax and CADI as well for carbon disclosure. So we can also show those if you're interested. And that, I think we are ready now to go to questions. Wendy, have we had any good questions come through?
Well, thank you very much, John. Loads in there. Thank you.
Rather.
I've learned some things this morning, and thank you guys for you kept voting, and I'm really impressed by what you guys are doing in terms of your carbon management plans, your reduction and your offsetting, and all of those things. So thank you for continuing to vote on that. There's a couple of themes really coming through on here, and I've actually got one that was really early on, but not on the chat function here, privately messaged, which is it better to, if you've got a given budget, to buy lower cost offsets or higher cost offsets? I think what we're really getting at here is if you have a certain budget, should you go for the CCP removals versus, or even a CCP or a non-CCP cheaper offset, if the difference is going to be 10 times on the cost, which would be better to do in terms of the overall impact on the climate? It's a fascinating question, actually.
So obviously if you've got a limited budget, then you've got a limited budget. The good thing about a carbon credit is is 1 ton of carbon dioxide. Obviously if they're, you probably have a little bit more confidence if they're being ICVCM CCP labeled, but there are some relatively good value projects even in that category, even though they may be a little bit higher than some other things. So 1 ton of carbon is a ton of carbon. So the cheaper the credit, in a way, you can have a bigger impact with your budget. However, there are credits. There's such a big range of prices. We didn't really get into that in this presentation, but you can be a few pounds a ton, all the way up to hundreds to £1,000 a ton for these big carbon removal projects.
Yeah.
And that ton of carbon is still the same. And a lot of the direct air capture projects that are more towards the £1,000 a ton still might not meet the ICVCM CCP label. So you could buy an ICVCM CCP label credit at a sort of the £5 or £6 a ton quite easily. And so for me, at the moment, because we need to reduce carbon emissions so much across the whole planet, reduction is just as good as removal. When we get to the end by 2050, it needs to be removal because all the kind of opportunities for reducing have probably gone and the cost-effective ones have gone. So it's use your budget and buy as many credits as you can, really.
Yeah, and it's both. I mean, I think there are a few themes around here which are really: is it reduction? Is it compensation? It's both, and as much as you can, it's both. It's not one or the other. It has to be both. It's pragmatic because we're in a situation of climate crisis, so it needs to be both. I'm going to take the question here. Thank you, Chris. Are there any projects on CRISP that are not sold by Carbon Footprint?
Oh yeah, well yeah, there clearly are. So we've rated at the moment, like I say, almost 2,000
Yeah,
projects on
yeah.
CRISP. If you go to the comp website, which is kind of the majority of the credits that we have,
Mhm,
there's only about 70 credits there, aren't there? So 70 types of
mhm,
projects there. So there's clearly a lot more that we've rated than we buy. We always rate a project before we buy it because we want to make it's just part of our process, and we've been doing this for a long time. We've just now started to show people how we do it,
mhm,
a bit of the magic behind the scenes, if you like, and opening
mhm.
and providing accessibility to that.
Yep.
So often when we're looking at a project, well, occasionally when we look at a project,
Mhm,
if it doesn't really pass our criteria after we've done the ratings, then we won't buy it or we won't offer it to our customers.
mhm,
But we will still keep the rating on the system.
mhm,
And also the other thing is that although there may be the best part of 2,000 projects rated on CRISP, they're actually not all
mhm,
available at the moment.
mhm,
So some may be out of credits or waiting for credits to be
mhm,
issued. So there's the whole market availability. Whereas if you look at comp, what's there is actually available. And if there's a particular project that you want to buy on comp, but it doesn't look like there's enough
mhm,
credits, then let us know, because
mhm,
we might have actually more than what we're showing on comp, which I think we do across everything at the moment. Um, but
mhm,
we also can potentially get more credits as well.
mhm.
So just
Okay.
restock if we need
And
to.
actually, it's someone's PM'd me again here. Is Crisp really completely free to use? Others
Uh,
charge to see
yeah,
ratings?
it certainly is at the moment. So the idea was to,
Yeah,
be completely
yeah,
transparent, really.
yeah. Okay.
The ratings agencies, there are other ratings agencies. They come up with a slightly more complex ratings that are more
Mhm,
related to financial
mhm,
instruments. I don't know why they came up with it like that, which is, to me, is just way too complicated. Plus, also you've got to pay for access to it.
mhm,
So we've come up with a simpler system that is free
mhm.
to use.
Okay.
And
Great. Great. I think we're getting a little bit close to time. Where does the another question? Where does the money go when getting the carbon credits?
so the money obviously goes through Stripe, through banks, through us, but also we've obviously bought these carbon credits, so we've invested in them, and so the money comes back to us, so we can go and buy more carbon credits. But ultimately, the money goes, the majority of the money goes back to the project. There
Project.
are obviously other costs as well,
Mm,
from us marketing it, banking costs. There's the
mm.
costs of the registry fees. There's costs of the verification fees for independent third parties that go and verify it. So
So you
it
know
does get
those
split
are
around a
high
bit, but
integrity and
yeah,
those are necessities
they
to
are.
let them
It's
wear
all
that
part of
label.
it, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm. Great, great. Okay. Yeah. There's another question I got was can we get SAF certificates to offset our flights?
Well, that's a good one, isn't it?
It
So,
is.
where do we start with that? That sounds like a webinar in
Yeah.
itself, doesn't it?
Yeah, I think this is kind of in the realms of these new, what I'd call nascent offsets, and there's a whole realm of them, aren't there?
Yeah.
And I'd say that sustainable aviation fuel certificates are one of the newer ones, and yeah, there might be two aspects to this, which actually might touch on someone else's comment here of how does it fit into carbon accounting as well. I think that was one of the questions there. So if we can we answer the SAFC question, and then we'll answer how the credits fit within, say, carbon reporting. How does that get written
It
down
kind
as your
of,
final footprint?
yeah, it
John,
all
if you
kind
could
of
take
fits
that in
together.
the yeah.
It all fits together, doesn't it? I'm not sure if I'm totally
Mm,
the right person to answer this, but my understanding at the moment is the Greenhouse Gas Protocol is looking at how to use SAFs
mm,
and whether they can be used or not. I
mm,
think at the moment they're
mm,
not usable within the Greenhouse Gas reporting system, but it's likely to evolve over time. If I've got
yeah.
that wrong, yeah, I'll.
Mm.
We'll, on the edit of this, we'll put the correct thing
It
over the
is
top.
interesting, actually, with the just to pick up that point. Obviously, I would imagine that the direction this would go, if you were applying SAF certificates to your emissions, it would only be permissible to the flights and not to
Of course,
something
yeah,
else.
yeah, of course.
Um, but to be honest, with it sounds like a great idea, but the costs that we're hearing at the moment are anything between $200 to $600, I think, at the moment.
Per
Please
ton
pop
of
it in the
carbon,
comments
yeah.
if you know a different number to that.
Yeah.
That's a per ton CO2 abated. So they're quite pricey at the moment, which probably relates to their availability. And this is the same issue, isn't it, really, as we face with some of the newer removals projects, would you say, John?
Exactly. No, exactly that. Yeah. So,
Mm,
well, the
okay.
removals projects
Yeah.
are obviously quite
Mm,
expensive to run,
yeah.
but as
Mhm,
they scale up, you'd expect the prices
mm,
to come down. It's also very new, and there's
yeah.
a very
Yeah.
limited supply. Yeah.
I think, as we look forward, all of those nascent projects are going to scale up. Greater availability will, the cost base will change and those will come down and then become more affordable. Just thinking of how this fits in with, say, the Oxford principles for carbon offsetting and ISO 14068 and the pathway to net zero, how this all fits together. So maybe in the last minute, John, you could make a comment. I think that would help people there, and how this all fits together with the internal reduction of your footprint alongside making sure that you absolutely own those emissions that you continue to produce. They're still there, and what you're going to do to manage all of those things.
Yes. So yeah, in terms of the Oxford Principles is really quite a good foundation to have a look at and to follow, and
Yep.
that's quite pragmatic. It kind of realizes
Mm-hmm.
that ultimately we need to be removing carbon emissions from the atmosphere,
Mm-hmm.
but there isn't enough carbon credits at the moment, and removal to be able to do that. And at the moment, the focus also needs to be heavily on reducing carbon emissions. So if you look at the Oxford Principles, it's sort of there's a curve effectively of switching between, gradually transitioning between reduction projects to removal projects. And we need to do that gradual transition. We need to start supporting removal projects now, so money is going into those types of projects to help develop that whole type of project,
Mm.
which requires investment now
Indeed.
and
Indeed.
to enable it to scale up.
Mm.
But at the same time, we also need to be reducing carbon emissions around the world, or avoiding carbon
Mm.
emissions. So a
Exactly.
balanced approach is what's important at the
Exactly.
moment.
Exactly. So it comes back to, my the question about what's better. Should you give more of the budget to the budget goes to the ones that are going to
Yeah,
give you the bigger carbon reduction for
yeah,
the money. It comes back to that, and that's a balance, really. We do want to
cool.
support, obviously, those more nascent projects, but at the same time, we've got to get
Yeah.
those emissions down.
Yeah,
Great.
I can see one final question from Duncan Lloyd, actually, it's just quite clarifying that I think this is on the back of us talking about the SAFs, that surely, if a company flies and makes 100 tons of carbon emissions, then you could just buy 100 tons of carbon offsets from comp, and obviously that is the correct answer, Duncan. And it's obviously a lot cheaper than buying SAFs. But I think going forward, I think SAFs will become more
They will.
available,
That
and
number will
hopefully the
come
price
down,
will
and
come down as
obviously
well.
there will be the need to support SAF rollout is absolutely there, and we'll continue to be lobbying governments, etc., to make sure that happens. We're right on the hour now, so I'm going to say thank you to John for taking us through today's Carbon Academy subject, and we will send you the recording just shortly after this. In the meantime, do go and visit the Knowledge Hub. I've popped a couple of comments there in the chat right now. You go to the QR code, you can check out all sorts of things. We have sections there on target setting and carbon management. There is also the Sustainable Business Network, take you into the energy efficiency and retrofits area, which I know a number of you are interested in. So please do go and check that out. All that remains is for me to say thank you so much again, and have a great weekend.